tradition. What to the Slave is the 4th of July, 6 a.m., bright and early. Share it. If you're not up that early, I know it's a holiday. It'll be available on demand tomorrow. Perhaps the most important speech, the most important statement about the 4th of July, and it's applicable to our context as our struggle certainly continues. I was saying as I bring on my next guest, Frederick Douglass understood fusion politics. He worked with different groups of people. He spoke to a women's group in 1852 up here in Rochester, New York, on July 5th. The 4th of July fell on a Sunday that year, about ending slavery. Dr. Barber is continuing that tradition in terms of fusion. We saw that at the Poor People's Rally on Resurrection City a couple of weeks ago. Black and white and brown and red and yellow all together. And so we take that example from Frederick Douglass. The struggle continues. Nothing ever stops, of course. Joining us now on the phone to close out this morning's show is our friend and brother with the latest on the Poor People's Campaign, the Reverend Dr. William J. Barber. My brother, how are you this morning?
I'm well, Mark, and thank God for you, man. Thank God for the consciousness that you keep before us. Frederick Douglass was also a media specialist.
Yes.
I found out that he was offered some money. People wanted to support him, and he said, finance this paper.
Yeah.
So that we have an arm of the media that can tell the story of truth and love and justice, and that is a powerful story. Whether it be 1852 prior to the Civil War or 1857, when the Dred Scott decision happened and people were saying the movement was over, and then in March of 1857, Frederick Douglass said, no, let me tell you, the movement is growing. They just made a major mistake. He said that, that's going to make the movement grow. And then after the Civil War, he hooked up with people like Lucretia Mott, who was a Quaker, and others to fight for women's suffrage. So, indeed, he is a tremendous model of fusion politics and what we need in this time especially.
Dr. Barber, where are we from just a couple of weeks ago? And again, we haven't had a chance to talk since then. I know you were in London last week, but congratulations on what I think was a very successful and historic rally.
Well, it was, and with your help and others, and our co-chair, Reverend Dr. Liz Steele Harris, and 40 coordinating committees in 40 states, we started out saying we wanted to launch the campaign this year, not end it. Had 3 simple goals. Number 1, to change the narrative, to push the issue of poverty back into the public discourse. We have seen massive amounts of media doing just that. We had, I don't know if I told you this, Mark, but over nearly 20 million Twitter impressions. The day of the march, we had, over 30,000 people who have committed themselves to be the founding members of this Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. They represent every state from Alaska to Alabama, and we had 400,000 people online that viewed that. 400,000 people that viewed it, and it was, a tremendous 40 days. Had over 3,000 people do civil disobedience in 40 states. And one of the things that has impressed me about what people are doing is the coming together. Whether it be in Kentucky or Mississippi or California or Ohio, this building of these coordinating committees that were engaged in the campaign and now are deep diving as we begin to move to the next phase this year, which is going to be massive voter mobilization and registration among poor and low wealth communities. So it has been, and during the period of the 40 days, I was invited to Liverpool, as you said, to speak before the UNI Global Labor Congress, and 131 nations were there, and they endorsed the launching. They said we have to launch this campaign internationally, so we're going to be doing some work in the months to come with international bodies as well.
So for those who are listening, and folks, text moral to 90975 to stay informed and stay involved. Just to be clear, we had these 40 days. Is the idea at the same time next year to have another 40 days at that period of time?
There is some conversation, and you know how I am, always kind of with actual what we're going to do. There's some conversation about whether we will do that. I can tell you that our three goals was to change the narrative, begin that process, to engage and train people how to do massive, simultaneous, nonviolent, moral, civil disobedience. Because I don't believe in the times in which we're in that we can take that off the table at any time. And we have to have a core group of people that can not only do it, but do it over a period of time, Mark. Because, one-day actions are great, but we're in a season now we're going to have some consistency. And then we also want to train people how to do massive power building and voter mobilization. So I will say, Mark, this is a launch. We're in conversation now about how we're going to strategically move. You heard that day that we said we came, we did all of the steps to civil disobedience. We took our agenda and letters to deliver them to every member of Congress and the Senate around the country, state houses. We tell folk we would be back. We're committed that there's going to have to be some time that things get shut down, if you will. Because we cannot have 140 million people poor and in low wealth, and 73% of them are women and children, and that represents 43.5% of this American population. You can't survive as a democracy and not address those issues. So we are. I will say this: this was a launch of a campaign. This is the building. So that's why we're building from the bottom up, so the campaign has deep roots and no one person or one group can be taken out and the campaign be over.
Yeah.
This is serious business we're engaged in. And Mark, you and I have had these conversations. If you look at our Supreme Court right now, last 4 weeks they've attacked working people, union rights, Muslims, gay people, and voting rights. They almost have a fusion campaign in reverse. It is, they have a fusion agenda. It's attack, 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 and you have to have a movement that comes against that. And now we're talking about putting a Supreme Court justice on, and I agree with people. We ought to be concerned about Roe versus Wade, and that ought to be a question. But we ought to also be questioning this. But where do you stand on the 14th Amendment? There are people talking about undermining that. Where do you stand on voting rights?
Yeah.
Where do you stand on workers' rights? Where do you stand on presidential power? We can't limit our critique to just one issue.
Yeah. And I didn't ask that question to suggest that we wouldn't do anything until next year, but that's just one thing that's effective, and it's really. It's challenging us, but also a little bit scary. Then in the midst of all this other stuff that's happening, if it's not for you, and I want to acknowledge the Reverend Dr. Liz Steele Harris, who we've not had on the show. And next time we're together, brother, I want to have her on too, because she's your equal partner. As I was saying, folks, I'm trying to compare my brother here to Frederick Douglass. He probably don't want me to do it, but watch this. Frederick Douglass, 1852. Tomorrow speaks to white women. He's given a speech. He wasn't giving his speech in front of the NAACP. There was no NAACP yet. There was no Marcus Garvey yet. All right, after Frederick Douglass came Marcus Garvey, the NAACP. So he's speaking to a group of women. Dr. Barber working with a fellow clergy person who is a white woman. So, and a lot of times we iconicize our ancestors, which we should. But before he was an ancestor, Frederick Douglass was walking around like Dr. Barber. He was just Dr. Barber. He was just who he was. And so Dr. Barber is continuing that tradition. And if you all are watching our stream on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, Make It Plain, we actually have, as we're discussing, Dr. Barber and I are talking, you hear the audio of us talking, but you see the video of the Reverend Dr. Liz Steele Harris speaking at the rally at the Poor People's Campaign. You can see it for yourselves. We want to get her on, but the point is that no one other than the two of you in this movement are lifting that up as an issue of poverty and ongoing poverty, which is, again, consistent with what was going on 50 years ago. This was not only Dr. King's campaign, but by this time, 50 years ago, Bobby had been killed, and Bobby died talking about poverty.
Talking about poverty. That's right. And you pointed that out. And Dr. King, because we have to have an honest remembrance of history. Many had abandoned civil rights communities, churches, whatnot. So he pulled together this eclectic group of people like the Jewish Federation and the welfare rights worker women, and my good friend Al McShirley, whose house had been blown from up in Kentucky because he was organizing black and white people in eastern Kentucky. He was in that first meeting. And Liz and I have taken this very serious, and think about it. She's, my training and upbringing with my father had always been fusion, politics in rural eastern North Carolina. I pastored in a predominantly white denomination, even though I'm a predominantly black congregation, but it's very mixed. My denomination is the first predominantly white denomination that has a black sister leading it. Now, Liz is Armenian. Her people had to flee, in Europe, came here. And Mark, did you know the Armenians had to sue to be counted white? They didn't want to count them as either, black or white. They had to go all the way to the Supreme Court. And here this sister is, she's a PhD in New Testament, and her book is, her PhD work was on the issue of the scripture that says, the poor shall always be with you, and how it has been misused and misquoted and misinterpreted to justify poverty.
Yes, sir.
And
yes,
then,
sir.
And you were there, Mark, you MC, you saw we didn't have leaders speaking for people.
That was amazing.
We had people speaking for themselves.
That was amazing.
I've
been emceeing, and I thank you for the honor, brother. I've been emceeing stuff on the mall for almost past 30 years. That's the first time, ladies and gentlemen, where I saw it done this way. Dr. Barber had the heads of organized labor introduce rank and file spokespersons, not even people with titles. And it was beautiful. Lifting up people. And I think it's important, as we talk about the Supreme Court, Dr. Barber, because what people, we always focus on Supreme Court and civil rights cases. But the Supreme Court, 95% of these cases that it hears are not about civil rights. They're about money and corporations.
That's right.
And a lot. So maybe we need to get one of our scholars as soon as this nomination is coming up. We need to get one of our scholars to do a deep dive as how Supreme Court decisions have impacted and caused greater poverty.
That's it. Now you're talking, brother. Because even the cases on voting rights are about money. Because if as I tell folks, 5 years ago, June 25th, 2013, a day that will go down in infamy, like Franklin Roosevelt said, the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act and opened and took away pre-clearance. And if you track that, the number of states that passed voter suppression laws, the number of people that are now in the Congress that wouldn't be there, the Brennan Center says about 16 members in the House that wouldn't even be in the House. And the number of people that won in their elections, and then hook that to their votes on economic issues. There's a direct correlation between the states that have engaged in voter suppression, where 54% of African American voters live, and people using racialized voter suppression to get elected.
Right.
But once they got elected, they passed bills that primarily hurt poor and working people.
Yeah.
That's a direct correlation, and it's got to be exposed. And that's why, again, you saw people, tell their stories, like whether when you saw the people who lived in the homeless camp from Washington, but you also had the sister from, Alabama. You had, as you said, you saw those. I said to the labor leaders, let's lift up the workers.
Yeah.
And empower. Yeah. One lady, Doc, was just so in tears. She said, I never thought that I would be in an organization that would allow me to have a voice for me and the others like me. And that's how you build a movement. I probably spoke the shortest I've ever spoke anywhere that day. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because the point was to give the platform away to the people, because the people are what Dr. King called an unsettling force.
Yes.
An unsettling force. Yeah.
That's right. The Reverend Dr. William J. Barber with us. So, Dr. Barber, what can we expect next? What's the next thing we're gonna see and hear from the Poor People's Campaign?
Well, one of the things is we have a meeting next week where we're doing some planning. I will guarantee, and we're going to make a big announcement about this major action, this simultaneous voter mobilization and voter registration. We also, as you did ask me, I just not at liberty to say it this morning. We said to folks, we're coming back. For instance, yesterday, I don't know if you heard, Mark, the Kentucky governor blocked the Poor People's Campaign from even going in the Kentucky State House. Yesterday, the Attorney General of Kentucky ruled against it.
Okay.
And exposed.
Good.
So we're going back, and that victory in Kentucky is also a warning to other state houses. And so we're looking at some other days to dramatize what is going on. I'll be talking to you if you give until after next week about August. And the thing people can do, though, is, as you said, text moral to that number. I mean, is it action to that number, 90975. I think that's the number. You have it in front of you.
90975. It says text moral to 90975. Should we text moral or text moral. Action? Oh, the moral, okay. 90975. Yeah. Text moral to 90975, folks.
That's right. And I think now it's set up where you can do either one. But anyway, if you text that out, go to poorpeoplescampaign.org, because we're really, building out a long-term army. I mean, there are going to be some days and some periods of time that we're serious about shutting things down. At the end of the march, the Capitol Police would not even allow us to walk to the steps,
Yeah, I remember. I was right out there. They didn't want us to go up to the go to the steps of the Capitol. Lyndon Johnson used to wake up every morning and worry about what Martin Luther King and Dick Gregory was saying to them. That's when the movement dictated what was going on in the White House. And we need to restore that. We need to get back to that. And that's what Dr. Barber is trying to do. We are on offense, not on defense.
And
that's the paradigm we're trying to change. Yeah.
They didn't just decide to do that. And part of the reason is that they saw for 6 weeks us keep coming back. And we're not through. Yes, sir.
We're not through. Reverend Dr. William J. Barber, our very special guest. Dr. Barber, as always, man, we love you. We thank you. Okay?
Thank you, my brother, always. And back to your audience, we love you, Doc, and love them. Thank you.
All right. Take care, man. And so, folks, as we get ready to get out of here, I want to remind you tomorrow, What to the Slave is the 4th of July. Tomorrow morning, beginning the show on the 4th of July. If all minds are clear, it has been made plain.